Welcome to Mind Over Matter, where the inner world meets outer transformation. Today, we are exploring a topic that is as liberating as it's practical: how imagination shapes reality. Our guest is Dylan Borland, founder of the Caden Academy, a school dedicated to conscious creation and inner transformation. Dylan helps people move from fear and survival into alignment and personal power by teaching how the mind can literally create the life we experience. Welcome to the show, Dylan. It's such an honor to have you.
Anya, thank you so much for having me, and it's an honor to be here and talk with your guest as well.
Mhm. So, Dylan, you talk about imagination as a tool for shaping reality. How do you define that in practical terms?
Yeah, I will condense it as short as I can, right? But, if we look at the power of the subconscious mind and the power of imagination, we really get down and we boil it to its essence. What is reality? What is this existence that we experience every day? And if you just take a step back from a 10,000 foot overview, you begin to question and wonder and see that everything in our outer world stems from the imagination, does it not? And so, for example, the equipment that we're using right now for this podcast was once in someone's imagination. The podcast that we're doing together, I'm sure you and I saw each other somewhere in our mind, not literally, but envisioned ourselves and used our imagination to do these podcasts, right? And so when you begin to look at all of what we experience in the outer world, there seems to be a correlation of what we experience in our outer world typically starts with what we're envisioning in our inner world, right? And so they often say in spiritual teachings that your outer world is just a mirror of what your innermost beliefs and desires are. And so I really started to get fascinated with that idea. And if you've ever experimented with, I call it conscious creation, you might call it manifestation. There's many different ways to describe it. But you begin to experiment with this and you begin to see the power of your mind in your innermost beliefs to transform and come about and reflect back to you in your outer world. And you realize, well, maybe a lot of what the spiritual teachers and even religious teachers are teaching us, that the power of God, that the power of creation is within us. And then how is that so? And that subconscious mind, that imagination, is the mechanism in which shapes our outer world. And you can test it for yourself. And so it's just, for me, it was one of those things in life where I began to see little signs of what I would see in my mind and my imagination when I began to attach feeling to it. And I began to attach faith to it. And I began to feel as if what I wanted in my mind was already mine. It would come to be. And so then you get better at that process and you begin to say to yourself, wow, I do have the power to create. They always say, and I often say that reality is what you believe it to be. If you believe that life is a struggle, life is going to be a struggle. If you believe that you're not going to heal, the doctors tell you you're not going to heal, you have 6 months to live, most people that believe that end up passing away. And so what's happening there, right? And it's those inner thoughts. It's that inner dialogue. It's what you impress upon that subconscious mind through your imagination, both with attaching feeling and faith to it. Then you realize that you do have the power of creation, that you do have the power to transform your outer world, that you're not a victim of life, that you're not subject to luck. You're not, life is not happening to you. You move into a position like we call in our school. You move from unconscious creation, which is you're just not thinking about it. You're creating one way or another, to conscious creation, where you are in control of what it is that you want to see, reflected back to you in your outer world. That's a 10,000 foot overview. So,
No, that's amazing.
yeah.
How does someone maintain this perspective when faced with setbacks or resistance?
So that's the thing, right? And so reality is reflected back to you. And you don't have to just listen to what I'm saying. I wrote a book on it. You can actually experiment with it yourself. But reality is a mirror. It's reflected back to you what your innermost thoughts are. So if you're surrounded by a whole bunch of people that are telling you it's not possible, you won't heal, life's never going to change, you're unlucky, these are all things that are being imprinted upon this powerhouse of creation. And so, like we teach in our school, it starts with awareness. There's 4 pillars of conscious creation. The first is awareness. You can't begin to change something that you're not even aware of. If you didn't know you have a health issue, how could you even work on it? If you didn't know that you were bad at math, I'm just thinking of like school, right? How do you begin to work on it and improve? So the first step is being aware, right, of this. And then the second thing that we teach is remembering who you are and remembering that the power of creation is within you. And then the third thing is moving into imagination creates a reality, using your imagination to shape your reality, and then living it and experimenting with it. But when we come to this concept of imagination creates reality, going back to your question there, Anya, is, it's important to see with faith and ignore your outer world. So to ignore the news, to ignore the media, to ignore your opinions of others and friends and family and school, and stick with, nope, I'm the creator of my experience. I'm going to ignore all of the stuff that's happening around me, and I'm going to have faith that this process. And so, there's scripture in the Christian world or in the Bible that says, don't see with your eyes, don't hear, along the lines of don't trust your ears, your eyes, your senses. You have to have faith. And that's where faith comes in to this power of creation, because as you're experimenting with this process and you're experimenting with your inner thoughts to create your outer world, there's going to be a whole bunch of noise that tries to knock you back off of that track. But there's an old saying that says to become somebody new, you have to die to your old self. And so you have to let go of your old beliefs, of your old concepts. You might need to let go of family or friends or colleagues or workers that are keeping you pinned down and tied into this world that they believe, so many people believe is happening to them that they have no control over. And you might have to isolate yourself. They always say to hear God the loudest. You often have to do that in solitude. You often have to do that in silence. And so if you want to become somebody new, it might require a cleansing, both dying to your old self, but also eliminating the noise and the distractions around you that are trying to pull you back into that cycle of unconscious creation.
Yeah, that's inspiring. Like, it's a reminder that our thoughts aren't just ideas, they're blueprints for living.
Absolutely.
And many people feel stuck in circumstances beyond their control. How can imagination help them reclaim energy?
Yeah, it's another good question, right? And so people feel stuck in a circumstance because they have not remembered who they are. They have forgotten, and this is why I'm so passionate about this work, that because they have forgotten who they are and that the power to shape their reality in their outer world starts in their inner world, right? And so when you're forgot that, and that's why we do this work, is we help people remember life is not happening to you, that you are the creator of your life. You're just either aware of it or you're unaware of it. And the problem is most people are unaware of it, right? They're going through life thinking they're a victim, life is happening to them. This might be what they were taught in different cultures. This might be their religious upbringing. There's a whole bunch of things that play a role in that, right? And so for us, that's why, and hopefully with the work you're doing with this podcast, it's a call to remember. It's a call to become aware. I am not the victim of life. Life is not happening to me, that I'm in control. And we experience these things of like victimhood. Life is happening to me. Everybody else is at fault, because that's our inner belief at the moment. And so it's beginning to be aware of that belief that's not serving us, and then recontextualizing, telling yourself a new story, shifting that inner dialogue with your imagination to then begin to reshape the world around you in a different way. So for example, you might say, I'm never lucky. You got to be you got to be very careful with these words, especially when you use the I am with it. And that might be your inner belief. And then so what do? You go through life always blaming the fact that you're unlucky. Well, if you want to stop being unlucky, start thinking of yourself as lucky. Reality is what you believe it to be. And so stopping that mental loop and that mental process and saying, no, that was the old me. That was the old Dylan, or that was the old Aanya. The new Dylan is very lucky. I just walked through earth and luck is on my side. Whatever story you want to create for yourself, you can be playful with it. But a lot of these beliefs and these habits, Aanya, are impressed upon us by our upbringing, by our parents, by our relatives, by our friends and family, by our culture, by our country, by our community. And it's stopping for a moment and saying, well, I don't want to live that way anymore. And so reinventing that story and reinventing the stories that you tell yourself, because everything you and I experience in our outer world is what we believe here and repeat to ourselves over and over again. And you can use the power of that imagination to redo the story and then repeat that, and that becomes your new life and then your new experience.
Yeah, that's great. And like, that's so empowering because the mind becomes a workshop and we are the architects of our own experience then.
Yes. And that's why I'm so passionate about this work, because I want it. It's a call to remember. I think people have forgotten and, forgotten that they shape their reality, that they shape their experience. And I understand, because as a human being, it's a lot easier to blame other people for how life is happening to us. It's a lot easier. The inner work is not easy. Being able to say and stop and say, no, I'm responsible for that failed relationship. I'm responsible for the stress that I have. I'm responsible for my lack of income. It's not the government. It's not this. It's not that, right? That's hard and that's uncomfortable. But that's where real change and real transformation happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
And
much easier to blame people, right, Aanya?
yeah. And you emphasize moving from victimhood to personal power. How does imagination facilitate that inner shift?
Yeah, so it starts with that awareness, but we use a tool called recontextualization. But you can also use the power of imagination. So, for example, you might envision yourself like maybe you're in a situation where you're trying to get a new job. And you keep applying and you keep saying to yourself, they're never going to hire me. I'm either overqualified or I'm unqualified. I've put in 12 applications and nobody's hired me. And these are stories that you're telling to yourself. Now, with the power of imagination, we might switch that story. So instead of repeating this loop in our mind and this image in our mind of, nothing's going to ever happen here, you stop and you create a scene in your mind that implies your wish fulfilled. Meaning, if you're trying to get a new job, instead of visualizing the process of you walking out and applying here and there, you create a very short scene in your mind that implies you already have that. So it could be, for example, you're at lunch with a friend and the friend is saying to you, congratulations, Aanya, on your new job. And then you can hear that scene in your mind. You can feel it. You can touch it. You can sense the atmosphere around you. That's the key point. It's not enough to just visualize. You have to have faith, which is keep going despite what's happening around you, despite what your senses are telling you. But you have to attach emotion to it. And so you create that short scene, not hoping, not wanting, not visualizing the process, but a scene that implies it's already done. So if we go back to what I had just mentioned, you're in a cafe with a friend, and you're having a coffee, and your friend says to you, Aanya, congratulations on your new job. You can smell the coffee. You can hear the chatter in the background. You might get a hug and an embrace from your friend, and you can feel that in your mind and your imagination. And then your only job is to not understand how that might come to be, Your only job is to continue to hold that scene in your mind and that feeling in your heart. And the outer world has no choice but to reflect back to you and bring that scene to creation. And so that's how you move, just a kind of an example from victimhood, life is happening to you, to no, I'm going to be the conscious creator of my life. And you can listen to me all day long on this topic. Yeah, Dylan, that sounds wonderful. But that's why I created this 39-page book that literally says a self-experiment in conscious creation, because I want people to experiment this with themselves, what we just described, and see for themselves and begin to realize that you can control and shape your outer world. Don't just listen to me, try it for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, how does someone maintain this perspective when faced with setbacks or resilience?
That's where faith is a major component. And so I forget the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of faith is just, ignoring the world around you, ignoring your senses, not looking for feedback from your senses in your outer world. It's having an inner knowing that the power of creation is within me, that I have the power to shape my reality. I understand that. I understand these principles, and just continuing to hold that scene, that short scene in your mind and in your heart with the feeling, despite what all of your outer world is telling you, and it will come to be. And that's where faith is absolutely critical, because you don't need to know how. All you need to do is hold that scene and that feeling, and it will come to be. And if it hasn't come to be, it's because there's some sort of blockage in your subconscious mind that you have not overcome yet, that maybe you still don't believe, or you still don't have the faith, or you still don't think it's possible. And so you keep doing it and doing it and doing it until it becomes your new truth, right? Until it becomes your new reality. You repeat it to a point in your mind, whereas you can't distinguish whether it's already happened or if it's still in your imagination. That's where you want to get to. You walk around and say, I could have swore that's already happened. I could have swore I already had that conversation in that cafe. That's how real it felt. And when you continue to do that, the outer world has absolutely no choice but to mirror back to you your innermost belief and your innermost thoughts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And that's profound. Like, it shows that change begins internally, even before external circumstances align.
Absolutely. Yeah, so they always say, and I've experienced this in my own work, there's a delay between our outer world and our inner world. And the way in which you shorten that delay all stems in how you feel. Are you absolutely 100% convinced, and do you feel it with every fiber of your body? And that's going to decide whether this outer experience shows up in a week or in months or years.
Yeah, totally. And also, your work applies to business, health, relationships, and purpose. Do you find one area is easier for people to experiment with imagination than others?
Well, we always recommend people start with something small and tangible so that you can prove to yourself this concept, right? Because if you're trying to manifest a healing, that's a big thing, right? And so if you're going right from not having faith into these concepts, is it possible? Absolutely. And that's like the work we do at this school. We move people through a 12-week program to get to the point where they've internalized these practices, right? But it takes time and it takes practice. And we have people start with small things. You might hear people try to consciously create or manifest something as simple as a parking space. In the book that I wrote, we do what's an experiment called the ladder exercise, where we have people visualize them climbing a ladder, and then sure enough, ladders show up in some sense in their life. And so the more time you experiment with these smaller, kind of more tangible things, then you start to prove to yourself what it is we're talking about here, and you prove to your subconscious mind. So then when you're working on something big, like maybe a health challenge, maybe you're trying to heal from a disease or cancer or an injury or something like that, you can go back to those smaller experiences and say, wait a minute, if this works on a small level, I know it's going to work on this level. And that's how you build the faith, and that's how you build the experience. And so we always encourage people to start with small experiments so that they can reference back to those when all of your senses around you say it's not working. You can go back and say, no, it works. See, here's 5 examples of it working. And then you move into the big things. And then you say, like, for me, I've overcome some health challenges of my own through the power of imagination. Then I say, listen, if I can overcome that with my thought, everything, I'm 100% convinced everything else is possible. You know, in scripture, in the Western world, a lot of people reference scripture. It says, all things are possible with God. Not some things, Anya, not a few things, but all things are possible when you know and remember who you are, right? And so to me, I've just always been fascinated with that. And I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in our students' life and the people that we coach. And so, yeah, so I just say start with small stuff and build upon it. And then you can use those as reference points, as waypoints along your journey.
Yeah. And I love that. Like small intentional mental shifts create momentum that can transform entire lives.
Yeah.
So thank you, Dylan, for showing that imagination isn't just a fantasy, it's the foundation of personal power. And to everyone listening, your mind is the first canvas of your life. Start creating consciously and watch your world transform from the inside out.